There's often discussion among fans of Mushoku Tensei concerning which adaptation is best, or which one you should pick up after watching the anime. And by discussion, I mean everyone says the light novel. If you're just finishing the anime, you may be surprised to learn that there are 4 different adaptations of Mushoku Tensei, each with their own quirks, so I thought I'd compare and judge them with this video. First, I'll explain each, and at the end I'll do several scene comparisons so you can really get a feel for the differences. The first iteration of Mushoku Tensei was the web novel. Published from November 2012 to April 2015 on the Japanese novel website Shossetsuka ni Naro, there are 24 volumes of the web novel. The second iteration, the light novel, began serialization back in January 2014 and concluded in November of 2022 with the 26th volume. The third iteration is the manga, which began in June 2014 with monthly chapter releases up until the present. As of this video, there have been 110 chapters adapting almost to the end of light novel volume 12. The fourth iteration is the anime, which began in January 2021 and has had 48 episodes in the first 2 seasons, plus an OVA, adapting up to the end of light novel volume 12. The light novel for the most part has the same content as the web novel. Earlier on they are identical, with the only changes coming in the form of side stories tacked on at the end of each volume. These are either character backstory, slice of life, or used to explain what other characters were up to during the main plot. For example, Volume 1 ends with a chapter about Zenith's backstory, Volume 2 ends with a chapter about what happens to Ghislaine after she is teleported. The extra chapters of Volume 3, 4, and 5 contain the story of Sylphie in the royal capital, which was the material that was hastily squeezed into Season 2, Episode 0. There is also a second extra chapter in Volume 5 about eating fried dragon meat. This also features a cameo from the Death God, who doesn't show up again for many volumes. During the volumes that make up Season 2 Part 2, there are several side stories that detail what Eris has been up to. My guess is that there will be a Season 3 Episode 0 which covers this the same way they did with Sylphie. You may have noticed that there are 2 more light novel volumes in the web novel. This is because Volume 7 is entirely new, covering what happened during a 2-year time skip which Rudeus spent adventuring in the northern lands. In the web novel, it just goes from Eris leaving to Rudeus killing the dragon. Along with that, Volume 22 of the web novel was restructured and greatly expanded into 2 volumes. This was to tie up more loose ends for the conclusion, and also so the characters can visit large regions of the map that were completely neglected in the web novel. Besides the side stories and 2 bonus volumes, there are a handful of unique chapters placed into the main continuity. An example of this would be Gallus and the raid of the Doldia village. None of this happened in the web novel. Rudeus just has to wait around prison until Rudyard and Eris show up. I wouldn't call the web novel a draft because it's pretty complete. More like the light novel is like a director's cut of the web novel. The manga for the most part is an abridged version of the story, cleaving out a lot of the world building, lore, and inner monologues, leaving only the main plot progression and drama. That's what I used to say, but now it's a bit different. Not gonna lie, the manga handled quite a few things better than the anime did in Season 2. I don't want to go too deep into this because this isn't a cut content video, but somehow the manga cut less than the anime in a lot of Season 2. There are actually 2 distinct eras of the manga. This graph I made shows how many chapters were created from each novel volume. At the beginning of the manga, they were actually squeezing something like 50 pages of light novel content into each chapter, which is just absurd. It completely destroyed any nuance or detail, and each volume crushed multiple hours of characterization into mere minutes. Lately, they've slowed the pace way down to the point where, on some occasions, it actually preserves more than the anime. You can see this with how the length has changed dramatically from Volume 5 onward. The manga likes to paraphrase the light novel more or less. Most of the dialogue and scene progression is altered to fit the constrained number of pages. I should add one more note because it doesn't really come across in the later scene comparisons, but the manga is a lot more lighthearted and comedic than other adaptations. Now I'm going to briefly cover some of the spin-offs. There are 2 prequels that have not been published outside of the original novel website, these being The Subjugation of the King Dragon King and Old Dragon's Tale. The titles sound a bit similar, but they are not related at all. The former was written 3 years before Mushoku Tensei and was a prototype for the series. It follows the second North god Alex Ryback 300 years before Rudeus' time and his battle against the Great Dragon, hence the title. This story is semi-canon according to the author, as some aspects were used while others differ from Mushoku Tensei's official world building. Old Dragon's Tale was written in 2016 and covers the distant past of Mushoku Tensei, following the Dragon Tribe and the destruction of 5 of the 6 worlds. If you watched my timeline video, there's a part of the light novel that tells a altered version of this story, but Old Dragon's Tale is the actual thing that happened. I can't explain it any further because it spoils everything, so best to check it out after finishing the light novels. As for sequel content, immediately after Mushoku Tensei's web novel wrapped up, the redundancy chapters began, which are epilogue happily ever after stories unrelated to the main plot progression and cover conclusions to many side characters as well as the thing. You know what I'm talking about. There's also Jobless Oblige, which takes place like 15 years after the main story. Can't describe this one either, but it's pretty good and may make you want to drop out of school. There are several spin-off manga, notably Roxy Gets Serious, covering her early life with 12 volumes published from 2017 to 2023. Eris got her own spin-off manga covering her off-screen sword training, but this was cancelled after one volume. There is also the Depressed Magician arc manga, which covers the Northern Lands period with Sarah and Counter Arrow, which was skipped in the manga. It is honestly better than the anime's depiction and is continuing beyond where Rudeus and Counter Arrow split, following Rudeus to his new party and what happens to Counter Arrow after he leaves. This image depicts how I feel about each adaptation. Each 300-ish page volume is adapted into 4 episodes of the anime on average, and these days about 10 chapters of the manga, which vary from 30 to 40 pages. Now let's do some scene comparisons in order of adaptation. In the original version of this video, I was a bit unfair to the manga by picking just one fight scene, which also occurred in the earlier, more truncated era of the manga. So this time I'm going to do 2 new ones as well. The first comparison is the fight between Ruijerd, Eris, and Orsted. I'd like to note that if you go and look up the web novel and light novel versions of these scenes, they will use different grammar and language, but in essence they're the same. Any difference just comes down to the fact that the web novel translations are fan-made. Let's begin with the light novel. Rudeus, run! You're in the way, Ruijerd Superdia. Ruijerd swung his spear. I couldn't move. It wasn't that I didn't try to run, just that I didn't have any chance to try. Ruijerd was taken out in a matter of seconds. All I could do was watch as Orsted easily batted him away, much like a human swatting a fly. Ruijerd was strong, at least he was supposed to be. Even Eris hadn't managed to defeat him once during our entire trip. He had 500 years of experience in battle, which should have made him practically invincible. He should have been stronger than a king-tier swordsman, and yet I could tell, with my demon eye, that he had lost. Through the eye, I watched the whole thing from beginning to end. Time-wise, it probably only lasted all of 10 seconds. There was no way that Orsted was faster than Ruijerd. It was just that with every move Ruijerd made, he was at a slight disadvantage. In the span of a second, this was repeated 3 to 4 times. Each time he moved, he dug his grave deeper. Bit by bit, he was driven into a corner. Each time he tried to attack, his balance suffered slightly, and each attack he tried to launch was stalled. A difference in ability, that's the only way I could describe it. Orsted's skills just overwhelmingly surpassed Ruijerd's, enough that I could see it clearly with my eye. Orsted was clearly drawing Ruijerd into a trap. He was moving as little as possible, yet at the fastest speed possible, rendering Ruijerd powerless. If a perfect combat strategy were made a reality, this is probably what it would look like. Orsted picked the perfect intervals to move in, putting himself at just the right distance for Ruijerd's spear to effectively reach him. It was as if Orsted were mocking Ruijerd, purposely putting himself in a position to invite powerful consecutive attacks, only to throw him off balance, cause him to stagger, creating openings in his defense and forcing Ruijerd to guard himself against heavy counterattacks. There was nothing Ruijerd could do about this. There were no methods left to him. He took a fist to his solar plexus, then the second grazed the tip of his chin. The third, which robbed him of his consciousness, was a fist that bore right down on his temple. Ruijerd rolled twice across the ground before he stopped moving entirely. Orsted could probably have killed Ruijerd on that third punch if he wanted to, but he didn't. Even with someone as remarkable as Ruijerd as his opponent, Orsted was able to hold back. Now then. Yeah! The one screaming wasn't me, it was Eris. She leaped in front of me and whipped her blade toward Orsted, fast as an arc of light. Secret technique, flow. Orsted wasted no time dealing with Eris. All he did was gently stop her sword with the palm of his hand. At least, that's how it appeared to me. And yet, that was enough to send her spinning through the air. She flew as though she'd been struck by a saint's ultimate technique. Eris had been outside of his line of sight. As soon as Orsted was taken out, she launched her attack from his blind spot. It was an incredibly deft offensive. As far as I could tell, she wasted no time thinking about defense and threw herself fully into the attack. In return, Orsted had used only one technique of his own to disable her. Wait, I'd seen something like that before. Paul had shown me a similar move. It was a water god style technique, though Orsted's execution was even more refined than Paul's. Eris crashed into the cliff face, rocks crumbled from the impact, and she landed with a thud. She was incredibly tough, so I didn't think she was dead, but she might have broken a bone. Eris Boreas Greyrat, you've honed your skills quite well. I believe you have potential, but you're still unpolished. Now for the manga. The bout begins with Ruijerd blocking Orsted's attack. Ruijerd tells Rudy to run, while Orsted tells Ruijerd that he's in his way. Orsted instantly uppercuts Ruijerd, making him flip several times. Orsted tells the unconscious Ruijerd that he's sorry, but Rudeus is an enemy, an apostle of the man god, and he must be killed. Rudeus doesn't understand what Orsted's saying, thinking he's been framed. Just then, Eris dives in to cut Orsted's head, right as he's about to strike Rudeus. Orsted turns and redirects the blade using a technique called quintessence flow. Eris is sent flying into the cliff wall. Orsted says Eris has improved and that she always showed promise, but is no master. I should have anticipated this sooner, but the clips will not be joining us. The things I had to do to them to make them pass the fair use filter is definitely worse than just not seeing it at all. Orsted vs. Dead End can be found in Season 1, Episode 21. The next scene I want to do is the death of Paul. This serves as an equalizer as it's not a fight scene, and it also takes place in the later era of the manga that's more stretched out. But first, the light novel. "You really saved me there, father." I glanced over my shoulder searching for him. There was no response. Everyone was quiet. Elise just stood there. Talhand was silent. Roxy pursed her lips, and behind them, Geese was pale as a sheet. Paul gave no reply. "Father?" They were all looking at something, so I followed their gaze to where Paul was. Collapsed on the ground. Yes, collapsed. There, on his back. But he wasn't just collapsed. He was unconscious. His eyes were vacant, and his lower body was missing. Huh? My brain couldn't process it. What? Oh no, I knew what had happened. That's right, I'd seen it myself. Paul had kicked me out of the way, because the spot where I'd stood was exactly where the last head was slamming down. He'd had to kick me as hard as he could to move me. I wasn't a child anymore, so he had to thrust his lower body forward to give the kick enough power. Normally that kind of kick would send a person reeling from the recoil, but Paul was a swordsman, a skilled one who could wrap himself in battle aura, one with physical strength, so when he kicked me, his body didn't move. That meant the place I had been, the place, I didn't want to understand it. But why? The moment I choked out those words, Paul's eyes moved, landing on me. I met his gaze. Paul said nothing. His mouth just softened like he was finally able to relax, like he was expelling a sigh of relief, and then blood gurgled past his lips. Then the light went out of his eyes. Paul was dead. Rudius says, "You saved me there, father." He looks around, back and forth, and then finally down in front of him, and tilts his head blankly. He takes a step forward as Geese runs over. Talhand and Elise look away, and Roxy covers her mouth. Rudius asks, "Why?" As he stands over Paul's upper half, Paul's eyes glance over at Rudius, and he smiles a bit. Some blood spurts out of his mouth while Rudius stands over him. Paul was dead. Same deal with this scene, I couldn't get it to work without absolutely destroying it, so you can go ahead and find this one in Season 2, Episode 22. For this next comparison, I'm not going to actually be able to read it since it's the journey through the desert. In the light novel, between arriving on the Begrit continent to reaching the Labyrinth City, it takes something like 100 pages, literally a third of Volume 11. Rudius and Elise take several weeks to get there. They have the succubus encounter, fight monster after monster, and end up saving a trade caravan near the oasis. They don't actually know their way to the Labyrinth City, so they end up getting hired by guards by that same caravan because it's already headed there. We meet many side characters embedded in the caravan. We learn a great deal about the continent, its ecology, and society. At one point, a whole army of bandits and horsemen with archers in tow attack the caravan and they narrowly escape. In the manga, literally the entire desert journey is cut. They walk outside, and the next chapter, boom, they're in the Labyrinth City. And the anime, we get to the succubus scene, peek at the oasis, a griffin fight, and then it's over. The anime removes almost all sections and locations that don't crop up again later on. Rudius never goes back, and we never see those side characters again. But I'm a sucker for adventure and world building, so I was upset. Also, by being a long trek, it made teleporting to the continent feel less like cheating from what should have been a 2-year trip. In my opinion, the light novel is the best version of this story. In the original video I said that the anime was the best, but the quality has diminished so much I no longer believe that. I used to feel that the show looked so good it made up for all the cut content, but Season 1 Part 1 is so far removed from what we get now. From what I've heard, a lot of renowned and talented people worked on the first part just to stamp their name on the series, and then very few stuck around. Since the beginning, the series has degraded pretty gradually until the present, where the quality is noticeably worse. It felt like most of Season 2 was spent conserving time and talent for the Hydra fight, as much as possible. It also doesn't help that the studio is taking on several other projects, whereas Mushoku Tensei Season 1 was the primary focus. The light novel has such an overflow of detail and nuance that it forces whoever's adapting it to cut quite a bit for both time and space limitations, and to keep the story engaging in a visual format. If all of Rudius' internal monologues and narrations of events were put into the anime, it would probably be pretty boring. But choosing what to adapt is a big part. I wish they sacrificed some time spent on Slice of Life and Renoa so that we could get Batty Gatti explaining a little more about the lore, like battle aura and why Rudius has none. That's something that crops up again and again in the story. Or Roxy's much longer perspective of surviving a whole month in the labyrinth, or the aforementioned desert caravan. If you've just finished the anime, I highly recommend beginning the light novels from the beginning, or at least reading the side stories that the anime skips. But I can see why that's a daunting task for some people to retread all of that, so if you just want to start where the anime ended, you would start at volume 13. As for the manga, it was overtaken by the anime during season 2, and as of recording, it's still like 2 or 3 chapters behind where season 2 ended. So if you're planning to retread content the anime has already went over, I would definitely recommend the light novel first. Otherwise, feel free to check it out. It's also a fresh take on the series that may interest you. Well, I hope this video helped clear up any questions you may have had, and thank you for watching.